Hello and welcome to I Can't Believe It's Not the Mouse, the podcast all about animation not made by the mouse. I'm your host, Octaviano Macias, and today I'm talking about Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. If you're unfamiliar with this film, I understand it's not the most widely available movie. It's out there, you can watch it on, as of this moment, I've seen it on Netflix, and there is digital releases of it. There is a physical copy of it, but you have to go through A24 to get it. It's an A24 movie, but it's different from their typical stuff. It's really different from the kind of stuff that they normally do, and it's kind of different from what I normally do here, because it is an animated feature, but there is a lot more live action in it than you would expect. Honestly, when it was nominated for Best Animated Film, I was kind of surprised, just because, while I did acknowledge what about it is animated, the main character and any of the characters like Marcel, the settings, the people, everything is in a real world. But hey, it's still animated, so it counts. So yeah, Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. This is based on a series of shorts that were done about a decade or so back. Same creative team. I know that these were done by the actress Jenny Slate. She basically does a voice very different from her usual, which to me just kind of signifies why the real issue when it comes to celebrity voice casting is less the celebrity and more whether or not the people doing the voices are allowing them to do different voices, if they even want to do different voices. But the common thing when it comes to the whole celebrity voice casting thing is these actors can't voice act, and a lot of these big name celebrities have experience voice acting because they started out voice acting. Yeah, maybe they're not professionals about it, but that doesn't mean that they don't have any experience or that they don't know how to voice act. And yeah, look, I'll be upfront and saying I want more voice actors in the industry, and I want more voice actors to get recognized in bigger films. I still think it's cool that the Sonic movies decided that for Tails they would just get the actress who normally plays Tails for the cartoons and games. But to keep it on this, you look at Jenny Slate's performance as Marcel versus a lot of Jenny Slate performances and other stuff. And not that she does necessarily bad voiceover performances and other stuff, but when you look at the Illumination movies that she's in, Lego Batman, Zootopia, she's pretty much doing her voice, versus Marcel, where it's a noticeably different voice. And I feel that comes from the fact that she has more control over Marcel than she does with those other projects. One of the things that I've learned when it comes to a lot of these, celebrity voice acting performances is that oftentimes the reason why you'll hear a celebrity just talk like themselves is because the people making it are pretty much well, we hired you for your voice. We don't want you doing a different kind of voice. And if they do allow them to do different voices, it's because they were willing to listen to them do a different voice. But yeah, because I remember, for example, with Detective Pikachu, Ryan Reynolds mentioned that he wanted to give Pikachu more of a an old school detective, noir kind of voice. But they were pretty much no, we want you to be Ryan Reynolds as Pikachu. So that was the whole basis of that, and that's kind of where I feel okay, yeah, again, I do want more professional voice actors and things, but I do feel people ignore the real issue when it comes to that whole thing, and they tend to overblow it, and basically are oh, we don't like celebrities, and celebrities can't do a good job, when it's really well, there's a variety of factors. I don't think it's entirely that celebrities can't voice act, so much as okay, we want you to do this, and we're only going to give you this many attempts to do it because you have your schedule and whatnot, and that's how it works out. Because a lot of it also comes down to just the direction, and not to throw voice acting directors under the bus, but you do notice in some of the straight to video the really cheap knockoff kind of movies, and when they do have actual voice actors, sometimes even the voice actors are really bad at it, and it's because like, well, if the voice director isn't doing a good job, what hope do they have? But that's a whole other thing. But I'm bringing this up mainly because with Marcel the Shell, a big part of the charm of the movie comes down to Jenny Slate's voice. She won an award for this. I don't know if it was like through multiple places, because the only place I know was the Annies. There's not a whole lot of places that award people based on voice acting, but I know she won an award for her performance, and it's well deserved. It is a really good performance, not just because she's doing a funny voice, but because she has to carry this entire movie based on what she's saying. Because a lot of the charm is pretty much just her character Marcel being this naive little shell. She's supposed to be like a little boy in this, just reacting, questioning things, and just naively, looking at the world and saying things to it, and it is a very cute and charming thing. At times I do feel like it's a little flabby, not to the point where it gets boring or anything like that, but to a point where I feel like they probably could have trimmed this stuff. But at the same time, it's one of those things where it's like you just appreciate a movie like this existing, where you can tolerate like, okay, yeah, you maybe didn't need to be as long as you got, but at the same time, there's so much charm to the character, and there's so much you lose if you just tacked it up and made it more, I guess I want to say streamlined, like something pretty much where like they speed through the entire story. I wouldn't want that. Too many movies pretty much focus on like, okay, let's cut off exactly to what we need, and I get it. I would prefer it that way until I start realizing like, well, sometimes the most beautiful scenes in movies are the stuff that is unnecessary. Sometimes it's nice to just have stuff like that kind of fill out a movie. Not because you need something to hit that 90-minute mark, but sometimes it's just nice to see how people approach telling stories. You give it to the bare minimum, and yeah, it maybe gets the story done, but sometimes it just loses the emotional weight of things, which is why I don't really have a problem here. And I've, as I've gotten older, I've grown to appreciate. This is probably the worst term to put it on, but I like to call it like like flabby movies, like pretty much movies where they have like a bunch of scenes where it's like, well, you could have probably cut a few of these down, but at the same time, it's a short movie as it is, so just let it come in, give me some vibes. It's all good. But this movie has a lot of that, and the other reason why I guess I can't really complain too much is that it is a documentary style movie. The movie pretty much is being recorded by this guy. Cause like the whole premise is pretty much like, okay, here's a house. It's pretty much an Airbnb. So people have rotated on staying on there, and Marcel is there practically alone at this point. He only has his grandmother there, and it's explained throughout the course of the movie that he actually had a whole community of shells there, like family, friends, all that stuff, but they've all disappeared after or at that point, like a few years back. Pretty much a couple that had been staying there got into an argument, and accidentally one of them took off with the whole group of them, and that was the general thing. And pretty much the person who's staying there currently, who's there for a while until he gets settled, is a guy named Dean. Pretty much is like the first person to actually acknowledge their existence, so he starts recording them. And I like the fact that the movie already starts with him already recording them. It's not like, oh, let's have this whole setup of him finding them and being all confused by it. It's like, no, he's already recording them because this movie is supposed to feel like a documentary, but at the same time it also feels like almost like a home video kind of thing. Like like they do go through the whole thing of like, okay, he puts some of the videos up, it gets popular online, so it's a reference to the fact that the show started off as shorts online, and it actually uses that to its advantage by creating this whole campaign of like, okay, here's like a news outlet, and people are trying to figure out what's going on, while some people are just thinking it's just like this cute celebrity thing. Like they even acknowledge the whole e-celeb status and how that affects Marcel and his grandmother. Which was one of the things I do appreciate about the movie is the fact that Marcel isn't like he's naive, but he's not exactly just stupid. Like he fully acknowledges like, okay, some of these people are a little too aggressive, and it results in him just basically like trying to close off some of these things to take care of the grandmother. And we'll talk a little bit about the grandmother stuff, but just suffice to say it's really good stuff. It's funny, it's emotional. It's basically a very simple premise. It's pretty much just like, okay, here's this documentarian recording this little thing that happens to live in this place. We learn about the fact that they used to be a much bigger community, and that kind of becomes, you could say, like the driving plot, like, okay, trying to figure out where they ended up, and then reuniting with them. You have this whole story with the grandmother where it's pretty much like, okay, Marcel learning to grow up and accepting change in life, and the grandmother just wants him to go through that without fear. All very cute, simple stuff. And I'm not gonna lie, the first time I saw this back when it came out, I saw it in theaters. It hit me hard. It still hits me hard now, rewatching it, but it definitely hit me hard back then. So the thing with Marcel the Shell with shoes on is, I mean, when I first saw the trailers, I was like, oh, okay, I vaguely remember this thing, and I was like, okay, well, I'll give it a watch. I mean, I like A24 movies. It looks like something different from them, and pretty much my initial plan was, because when I saw it, it was pretty much the same day that they started doing like the early showings for Nope, the the Jordan Peele movie, really good movie. I was pretty much like, okay, I'll just do it as a double feature. I'll watch that, and then I'll watch Nope. And I got a surprise a couple of days prior. Like I had already had the tickets, but I got a surprise a couple of days prior. Pretty much, I lost a family member, specifically my grandmother, and of course it definitely hit hard. Um, I was pretty much like, okay, well, I already have the tickets, and I do want some distraction from all this emotional turmoil. And I don't know, I guess I thought like, okay, well, it's just gonna be a cute movie. I'm sure there's gonna be some emotional stuff, but nothing that's gonna be too crazy. I ended up tearing up through so much of it, um, because a lot of it did remind me of her. And for a good chunk of the movie, it was nothing but tears. I probably never um, have cried harder in a theater room, whether it was with Coco or any other sad movie that you can think of. And yeah, it just hit me hard, because it's like, yeah, I mean, I did not expect this to happen, and I did not expect that this would be the movie that I'd be relating to at that moment for a number of reasons. But I still enjoyed it, even though it was definitely a hard watch, and it was like, okay, well, I kind of don't want to watch it again. Um, because of that, I ended up stumbling upon it on Netflix while I was looking for what to watch. I was thinking maybe I could watch the new DreamWorks movie, Orion in the Dark. I've yet to watch it. I've heard it's supposed to be good, and I saw this pop up on the front of Netflix's page. I was like, you know what? I think it's time to just give it a rewatch, see how I feel, and I still cry about it. I mean, it's not as hard as it was when I first saw it, where I was in the middle of a semi-packed theater. I mean, I tend to go to one that gets a little busy, and I'm like, right there, having to hide my my face. Not really, but you get that feeling where it's like, oh, I'm crying in the middle of a theater, and people are probably gonna be questioning things, even though who cares. But it was still just an emotional experience watching it then and watching it again. While it doesn't hit as hard, it still was like, damn, I'm back in that place. But it's still just a really satisfying movie from an animation perspective. again, a lot of this is essentially set in our world, so you kind of forget that it's animated at times until you see Marcel, moving around, whether it's through the character herself or just little things like at times Marcel gets around the house using a tennis ball. Stuff like that would have been animated. And, from that perspective, it's very cute. It's very much like much like this is a documentary home video kind of thing. The animation feels like something that would be right at home with someone who was not, I don't want to say like not like a starting to do animation, but someone who was aware of how animation works, but was doing it based on entirely on stuff that they had at home and weren't really focused on doing something big or grand. It was just more or less like, okay, we're gonna, take something we have around the house and just move it around, and this is gonna be like a fun side project, nothing too serious. But of course, it is the bulk of the movie, so it is animated a little better than what you would normally expect out of that. But for what it's worth, it is very nicely animated, and while it's definitely not the thing that you're gonna most appreciate coming out of the movie, it is something that's charming about it. Like I said, it has a very like at home video kind of vibe to it. Now, did it deserve better at the awards? I, the thing is, I do think that the best thing that this movie has going for it is Jenny Slate. She's really good at doing the voice, and her getting that acknowledgement was definitely worth it. I do think that the Oscars should start nominating movies based on vocal performances, and if they had it then, I do think that she definitely would have been one of the ones deserving of it that year. But in terms of just animated films in general, that was a pretty strong year, honestly. Its competition included Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, which I've talked about on here before. Incredible movie. That's the one that I do think deserved it, and I'm glad it won. You had Puss in Boots, which another incredible movie. I don't know. It was definitely a good movie, and it definitely deserved to be nominated, but I don't know if it's the one that I necessarily would have given it to if Pinocchio hadn't gotten it. But, awards are silly, and who cares about that? What matters is whether or not I think you should watch it, and I do think you should watch it. It is, just a really nice movie. Like, even if you don't have that personal connection to it as I do, which realistically a lot of you probably do, given that you probably have those family members that you've lost, or those family members that you might be reminded of throughout the movie, even if you don't. It's such a nice little movie, seeing the world through the eyes of this little thing that doesn't really understand everything, but at the same time is very aware of everything, just not exactly like, even though he doesn't know everything that's going on, he does know it's going on, if that makes sense. I don't know, it is something that is very different from the usual stuff that a lot of animation fans normally go to. But that's okay. I think more people should really try expanding their palette. There's way too many people out there who only look at, which is kind of the point of the show, only look at stuff like Disney or anything that's close to it, instead of dipping their toes outside and seeing what else animation has to offer. And if you're looking for something different that isn't quite the norm, but is also still family friendly, this is this got you. And it still has the emotional maturity for adults, which is great. Again, animation is a whole lot of things, and it always disappoints me when people talk about like, oh, animation is cinema, and they're the only examples that they can think of when it comes to that is like, okay, well, here's the stuff that I watched as a kid, or the stuff I'm watching now that kids are watching now. It's like, and don't get me wrong, some of that stuff is great, and some of it is better than this. Some of it is better than a lot of the more adult features. I'm fully aware of that. I mean, I still think one of the best animated films of all time is Wall-E, which is definitely something that kids could watch, even though I imagine most kids tend to stray away from it since it's not your typical Pixar movie, but it's still something that Pixar put out that kids will watch. It's just that it's like, there's a whole world of animation out there, and I'm not even talking about just going like, oh, well, go watch an anime that, has swears and blood and all that stuff. I'm talking about like just in general, this stuff that goes more into, like I said, emotional maturity, into the stuff that makes us feel for characters based on loss, stuff that has family members that are, around or not around anymore, just things that make us feel or think beyond just the standard stuff that, they tell kids. And again, not to diss a lot of those movies, I like them too, but there's no denying that a lot of them still have in mind, like, okay, well, we got a kid audience, so we gotta build it around them, versus something like this where I feel like, okay, a kid can watch it, but there's a high chance that the people making this weren't exactly thinking like, okay, well, how is little Timmy or little Sally gonna react to this scene or that scene? They were just like, okay, we're gonna make it in a way where, kids can watch, but we are gonna tell this story in a way where it's like, okay, how does it most affect us? How does it most relate to us? And that's pretty much what I love about it, and why I say that, yes, you should go out of your way to watch Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. It's on Netflix. Who knows where it'll be on next? I think Max has a partnership with A24 from what I've heard, so they might be getting it at some point. I don't know. Regardless of it, you can look it up wherever it's at. It'll still be out there, and it'll still be worth it. Just be aware that you might cry hard, especially if you've recently lost someone. Thank you for listening. This has been Octaviano Macias, and I'll see you again next time.
Not that I don't like Arthur.
Not that.
No, oh my God, no.
Thank you for coming on today. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel, where you'll see video versions of these podcasts. And if you just want to listen to them, there's always the option of just following the podcast on their various sites, whether it's Spotify, Podbean, or Apple Podcasts. Whatever you choose, I hope you continue enjoying these. And if you want to support me even further than that, there's always the option of Patreon. And in any case, again, thank you for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day.